holding on fourth page of the copies, page S, towards the bottom of the page, on line 27, if I remember correctly. And we were speaking about, to explain the problem about Avodim Hayinu Lepari B'Mitzrayim. How do we connect, say, that because it was Avodim Hayinu Lepari B'Mitzrayim, that is the reason why it was the joining of Ruchnius with Gashmis, that through a physical mitzvah, like we explained, the Eidos Chukim Mishpatim shows that it comes down very low in Dvarim Gashmiyim. How can a Dvar Gashmi cause the mitzvah? Asher Tziva Hashem Elokeinu Eschem, that's a bond between Hashem and us, not like the obvious mitzvahs that were the Ruchnius. How can the physical mitzvah that comes down all the way to a place where you need to have Eidos because it's godliness concealed, the place where you need to work hard to be able to bring down a lakos, you got to engrave it, the place where there's intellect, mishpatim, that intellect covers over on the essential bond of Mesiras Nefesh. How? So to explain that, he said, Avodim Hayinu is through the birur, through the refinement, through the Eidos Avodim. But we had a problem. How does that fit in with the simple meaning, Avodim Hayinu Lepari B'Mitzrayim, that we were the levels of the Avodim of Pari, Mitzrayim, and physically, Pari is the lowest level, Mitzrayim, and how does a Yid being enslaved to Pari have this thing? So to be able to explain that, we start explaining, you should know, Pari is the same letters like the word ha'oida, the neck. What neck are we referring to? The neck of Arich Anpin. Arich Anpin is from Kes. It's the highest, most levels. And it goes even higher. It comes from the level of the world of Toyu. And Toyu is so much higher, and because it's so high, it came down so low, just like the food feeds us, because even though we're also come from the Asara Amaris, even though we also have Moitza Havaya that's within us, still in all, the food is what sustains us, because the Doimim Tzemeachai, especially the Offer and the Adama, come from a higher Shoirish in Toyu, whereas Yidden and a person, Adam, which is Atom Krim Adam, comes from only from the level of Tikkun. So, and we gave the example of the stone on top of the wall, that when the wall collapses, the highest stone falls down the furthest. So now, he's going to connect it back with Mitzrayim. What took place in Mitzrayim? What was the event that is going on in Mitzrayim that because we were there, we are now able to be empowered? Because Mitzrayim also contains these very high sparks. And because they contain these very high sparks, therefore, it enables us, and more so, that Dafki with the physical, we are able to connect Hashem in a way of Tzafs and V'chib. So that's where we're holding line 27, page Ches, the fourth page of the Maimon. So, Indian, Reish Beis Nitzoitzes Shenoflu Mitzrayim. Know that in general there were 288 sparks that fell down from the Shviras HaKelim of Tayu, which we say energizes the whole world. But in Mitzrayim itself, 202 of them fell down. Like it says, also a mixed multitude went up with them. Siddur teaches, what's the Rav going on? The Koi ala Reish Beis Netzoitzes Nizbaru Begos Mitzrayim. It's going on the 202 sparks that were refined and elevated in Golus Mitzrayim. So that's the aid of Rav, the 202. This is the greatest number of the 288 sparks that fell down. In other words, the greatest number is to be found Dafke in Mitzrayim, Everywhere else, it's like fewer sparks. Mitzrayim had a joining of the most amount of sparks. Top of page test, Bishviras HaKelim. That's so. First of all, Mitzrayim had quantitatively the most amount of nitzoitzes to elevate. That's why Mitzrayim is so crucial to this connection that we are able to have today, Mr. with the Gashmias, because we elevated the most amount of sparks in Mitzrayim. Not only quantitatively, they are the greatest number of sparks, but they are also the most powerful sparks. They had the greatest levels and revelations of divine light and energy. In these 202 sparks. And all of these 202 sparks, which is like the greatest number in one place, and the most powerful revelations of the world of Tayu, the greatest type of lights of Tayu, came down specifically in Mitzrayim, because they were all refined then. We elevated all those sparks. That's why concerning Golus Mitzrayim, it says you shall not return again in this way. How come? Since all the sparks, land of Mitzrayim were arranged as butter and refined, since Mitzrayim was Nizbarer, which was over 3,300 years ago, now we're already over 3,000 years that we are being mevarer the 86 Nitzoitzes. And these 86 Nitzoitzes are Gematria Lakim. The name of Lakim is Gematria 36. Shemevarer in Bnei Yisrael B'Shara Goli is that the Yidden are refining the rest of the exiles ad l'gol za'achri until this final Gols. So then the logical question is, what is the reason that it needs so much more time, even though it is 86? If we were mevader 202, which is a greater number and higher type of oiris, why do we have to? That took only 210 years. Here, we're spending, like we said, over 3,300 years. We're doing the rest of the 86. What's the calculation over here? Because they were scattered and they crumbled into many smaller crumbs and little bits, very, very much so, which makes them very difficult to gather. Simply put, the mashal for this is, let's say you use the term breaking of the vessels. Let's use a simple example. A person, drops a glass, drops a plate, whatever, and it breaks. So there are big pieces. Those are easier to lift up and easier to find. And then there's smaller pieces, and then there's like slivers of glass that sometimes fly across the room. First of all, distance-wise, you got to go looking in a further area. And secondly, because they're smaller, they're a lot more difficult to find. In a similar vein, what did we say before? That the Nitzoitzes and Mitzrayim were a much greater light, which means also that they were greater and higher and easier to detect and find. Whereas the last 86 that are taking all this time is actually further and more scattered and more difficult to find, and that takes much more time to find. Let's see. There's in the beer, but on the side, he brings the Alter Rebbe and Torah very geschmack over there about certain details about it. Let's have a look at it. Let's go to the right side of the page, in the commentary part. In the beer, let's go into line 27. See, so he quotes the Alter Rebbe in Torah Ohr. The more the sparks of Toy descended lower and lower in the levels, more was increased the separation of the sparks, the scattering of the sparks. The Haynu every part of these 86 and every spark of these 86 is actually broken into further sparks and portions. These themselves break into further slivers. Again, perhaps we can use the following analogy. Let's say you have an item that's made up of 288 parts, and you dropped it, and it fell, and it broke. So some might break on the seams, and you have entire part number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it could be that part number 34 cracked and became 3 parts, and part number 95 cracked and became 15 parts, and so on. So the same thing he's saying over here, that of these sparks, many of those sparks broke down into further sparks. In Yaduam, it's known, it says the Ruach of Hashem was hovering over the earth at the beginning of creation. That's where we get the number 288 from. Reish Pei Ches Meis. Mirachefes is made up of the combination of words 288, died, meaning dying. Someone that falls from his level is called death. It was Shviras HaKelim. Haynu, Reish Pei Ches Netzoitzin Shenofel Ma'olam HaToyu in Makelim Shnizbru, the 288 sparks that fell from the world of Toyu. With the vessels that broke, because the vessels themselves are not the sparks. The vessels are actually those that contain the sparks. In other places, he says that when vessel falls and cracks, so then, let's say if you had in the vessel, let's say you had a cup of wine or whatever. So then there is the cup itself that breaks, and then there is the actual wine that's left stuck to the broken shards that are on the floor, or any other item that might be stuck. The same thing, there's the kalim itself that broke, and there's the oil. Most of the oil went up. But there's oil that's stuck to different parts of the vessel. The number 288 that we always speak about, this the separation of the sparks that fell, the way they were still falling into the world of Atzilus. That's where they became the 288 level. When they fell from Toyu into Atzilus, that was the beginning of their descent before they went on further. Then they broke down into the number 288. That's the 288 died from the combination of Mirachefes. But afterwards, when they fell from Atzilus to the world of Bria, so then as it ascends further, as it falls further, it now subdivides into more parts and divisions and breaks. Then it falls from then it divides even more so to many different parts and sparks. And as it goes down, it breaks apart even further. It becomes divided and separated to thousands and tens of thousands. Now the Alter Rebbe says over there, why Golus? Here over there he's talking about the Golus time from the Bayis Sheni time. This is understood why the Golus took place. And it's Nimshach even more than 1,700 years. When the Alter Rebbe said this Maimer, it was still 1,700 plus years since the Churban Bayis Sheni, since the destruction of the second basement. And we know the intention of all these golos is to refine these 288 sparks. When we will conclude refining the sparks, Mashiach will come speedily in our days. So it's a wonder. Top of page test, left side of the page, small letters, the beer. Line 42 on the left side of the page. How can it be that in such a long time, that you have one generation passes and one generation is coming? Every single Yid is refining the portion that he was supposed to refine. And also the number of the Yidden that need to refine its 288 sparks are 600,000, just like those that went out of Mitzrayim. Now at present, Alter Rebbe says, when he's saying the Maimer, the number of Yidden is much more than the number of 600,000. Hashem should increase over them. In other words, when he mentions the amount of Yidden, he has a bracha to this. How much more so in the times of the early ones, that there were villages that had more than 600,000. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to, but I'm sure he's referring to a certain Maim Chazal. So what's the reason? How come it's taking so long to finish the last 86 sparks? Down here in Nasiya, the sparks separated to thousands and tens of thousands, innumerable amounts. But the original number of only 288 is in the world of Atzilus. Just like the 288 sparks are also a general number, so do we know from Tanya that the number 600,000 neshamas, those are the klolistic neshamas shetzrichim levar reish pechas chalakim gedolim. And the neshamas klolis of Atzilus, they are mevarer the big general levels of the 288 sparks the way in Atzilus. Hein hanitzayt Atzilus, these are the sparks in Atzilus. Just like as it goes lower from Atzilus, it becomes more and more neshamas that broke out of the 600,000 general neshamas. So too the sparks became increased to thousands upon thousands of small slivers. Therefore, the golus is something that continues, and all the birurim were not yet complete. When the birur will be completed, so then that's when the golus will be completed speedily in our days. Any questions before we go on? Line 12, page test. So now, based on our understanding that in Mitzrayim, and this was all parenthetical, what we spoke about the sparks and the later golus, now we can understand what's the answer of Avodim Hayinu Lefarim in Mitzrayim. How does that answer? How there could be the tzafsa, how there could be the togetherness that's brought with the Eibishter, Shetziva Hashem Lakeinu Eschem, with the Eibishter through a physical mitzvah. So Avodim Hayinu Lefarim in Mitzrayim, Shetachlis Yidid, as I was saying, Mitzrayim, the goal and of the descent of our forefathers to Mitzrayim. To refine the sparks of Toyv that fell to Mitzrayim in the breaking of the vessel. These are very high sparks. This is the idea that we were servants to Pari. What was the reason that in the physical realm we were servants to Pari? Because instead of looking at it earlier, that Pari was a very low person and the Yid was enslaved to him, Chas v'sholem, it's just the opposite. Why were we enslaved to him? Because of his high shortage that we said that he comes all the way from Toyu, and Toyu is much higher than the Yid. That's because of the root of the sparks of Kedusha That's the level of paroi. We already spoke about paroi is the level of oiref. Another explanation of the word paroi is the Bei Ispiriu Kol Nahoirin. The Zohar says that in him, in the level of pari, in the godly level, all the lights are revealed, are opened up. It says Paras Rosh Isha, when something is loosened and uncovered. So the same thing, pari is an uncovering of very high lights and sparks. This is also the response for the question. How can there be the togetherness and the joining through the levels of the mitzvahs that are called Eidus and Chokim Mishpatim? That we said Hamalu Bosh and Bin Yoram Gashmin Dafkid, they're specifically enclosed in physical items. How can that be? That's because the great advantage of the sparks of holiness that were enclosed specifically in physical items. Because they were enclosed in physical things, therefore, that is what makes, that's what enables, and that's the reason why specifically physical connects with Hashem, because of these high sparks that are there. So, the Eidus for Chukim, top of the next page. This is also the exact language that it says. There's the Eidus and the Chukim. Now we said that specifically the Ben Chacham enumerates all these different types of mitzvahs. The idea of Eidus, of witness, is only by something that is not known and revealed, and not even something that's going to be revealed. So when we talk about mitzvahs that are called Eidus, these are indicating a level of godliness that's in a state of being concealed and covered. And chukim showing on engraving, that shows with tzarech yigia v'ishtalus. Because I guess it follows one from the other. Because elikos is covered over, so therefore you need to dig, you need to engrave, you need to work hard. Speaking is not enough. Even writing is not enough because they don't require so much effort. We need to have engraving and chiseling and digging very strong to be able to reveal the godliness, because that's how concealed and embedded the lakus and the nitzoitis are in the physical. Until something that's so far concealed and so low that they are civil, intellectually understood laws, mitzvahs that are intellectually understood, rational mitzvahs, gam seichel shenef shabamis. It's enclosed also in the intellect of the Nefesh Habamis. Even the Nefesh Habamis could understand not to steal, not to kill, to honor your parents, etc., etc. But the very fact that the Nefesh Habamis understands it, we know that intellect of Klippa, intellect of the Nefesh Habamis, is something that's really very hard to attain, very hard to elevate. It says in line 5, it's very difficult to refine the level of the intellect of Klippa Kimavur, but Tanya, like it's explained in Tanya, Dual, like it's also known from other places in Chassidus, the general avoida these days is only in refining the 7 emotional traits of the animal soul. That's why in the conquest of Eretz Yisrael at present, in the conquest, when Moshe Yeshua led the Yidden to Eretz Yisrael, they were only conquering the 7 nations, the Knani, etc., because at present, before Mashiach comes, is only possible the refinement of the emotions in Nefesh Habamis. As opposed to the 3 levels of intellect, the Chach would be in a das of Nefesh Habamis. It's impossible to refine it now. That is the level of that Avraham Avinu was promised that when Mashiach comes, he will also have the lands of Keni, Knizi, V'Kadmoni, Ammon, Moav, Edom. These will be lands that we'll only conquer when Mashiach comes, because these 3 additional lands, these are corresponding to the 3 levels of intellect that we'll only be able to mevar when Mashiach. And this refinement will be Mashiach come. Therefore, So the Rebbe takes this, if something like this is so hard to refine, the Chochmah of Klippa is very hard to refine. So when you have mitzvahs that are engaged with and appreciated by the intellect even of Nefesh Bahamis, you are therefore in very close proximity to a klippa that is very difficult to refine. And therefore, this is the lowest place, and that is where the strongest connection and the greatest sparks are hidden. In a way, it's very similar to what it says that the Chacham is placed next to the Rasha in the Haggadah, because the Rasha himself is also a Chacham. He's not stupid. He's a Chacham as well. But he used the Chachma in the wrong way. So therefore, they're really, in a simple sense, when you read the Seder, it goes in the Seder of the Chachma. Chachma obviously is the wisest. Then there's the Rasha, then there's the Tom, and Sheini Del Lishol is obviously the one that has the least amount of Seichel. But the Rasha is in the world of Seichel, and he's like the polar opposite of the Chacham. He's not like the Tom. And therefore, we see that a clip of the Seichel is something that we have to be very careful about to deal with. And therefore, he says in line 10, because the difficulty and the toil and the avoida of Eidus Chokim Mishpatim, only through the Eidus Chokim Mishpatim become the idea of together and joining with the Eibishter, because the sparks are found in these lowest things. Tziva from the word tzavsa v'chibur, the joining of Avaya L'keinu Eskom. Now the Rebbe is going to bring the same topic to the Geul, Ois Daled line 14. Just like Avaya L'keinu took us out from there, at that time, with all of this that we spoke about, so too, like the days of you going out of the land of Mitzrayim, I will show you wonders. Like we learned in the last Maimer, days, it says in the plural. Why does it say days in the plural? Because the entire duration of time, starting from that one day that we went out of Mitzrayim, until the future redemption, they are all days of going out of Mitzrayim. They are all a process of going out of Mitzrayim. But the means to reach the going out of Mitzrayim is different. When there was the literal going out of Mitzrayim in Tesvav Nisan, 3,300 something years ago, it took place through the Avodah with the physical mortar and physical bricks. As opposed to the future redemption, it will be through the Chaimer, alluding to Kal V'Chaimer, through Torah study in a way of Kal V'Chaimer. Or the Levanim, the Libun Hilchasa, and through the Levanim for the word related to Lavan, whitening, clarifying the halach. The God will tell us, maybe the mice, it's not just the Torah study, but the greatness of study is that all of these things, Kal V'Chaimer, the Libun Hilchasa says, brings us Lidei Maisa to action. And what action specifically, Maisa Tzedakah, Sheshkula K'neged Kol Mitzvahs, the actions of Tzedakah that corresponds to all the mitzvahs. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the main avodah these days is in the avodah of Tzedakah. In the times of the Tanoim and Amoraim, over there, Torah was the main avodah. Now, before Mashiach's coming, we need to elevate all the sparks, and that is the most amount of sparks we can elevate is through tzedakah, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, like it says in the Geras HaKodesh, by Dezeh, and through the avodah of the action of tzedakah, we raise up the fallen shelter of David, meaning both the base of Migdash and the level of Malchus and all the sparks, through the true and complete redemption through Mashiach.